So, Laura, go ahead and tell us who you are and give us a bit of a backstory into everything.
Okay, so my name is Laura Pholsina. I'm 22, just recently graduated from UNC Charlotte in spring 2019. I was born in Providence, Rhode Island, but I grew up down here in North Carolina most of my life. But where my family's from, my parents, they came from Laos, Asia, which is a small country, third world country between Thailand and Vietnam. And so basically just to bring back, all the way back to where, from my parents, they lived in Laos. They were born there. They lived there during the Vietnam War. And so they wanted to escape Laos because of the war happening. The government was corrupt. And so starting from my mom's side, very briefly, she moved from Laos to Thailand with her family and stayed in a refugee camp.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was there until I think the age of 16 and came to America with her family.
So the refugee camp. So she leaves Laos because of the war. And how much is the Vietnam War affecting the country of Laos during this time?
I mean, it's a lot, especially because from both sides, my mom and my dad, their parents or their fathers were in the military, so they did a lot, especially on my dad's side. Yeah. So apparently what happened was if, communism was taking over Laos, if they knew you were in the military, you would get executed. And so from my mom's side, at least, from what they've told me, my grandfather, he had to hide all of his military things, like his uniforms, etc. And they both had farms, so they dug a hole in the ground in the farm and dug it up and hid it, so people wouldn't find out he was in the military, so he wouldn't get killed.
So communism's spreading, and what year is this, or what time frame are we looking at?
I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, around there, 60s, 70s.
Yeah. Okay. So the communism's coming in, and then they go, okay, if you're in the military, because you're probably trying to squash anything that has remnants of the past era, they're coming, they're finding you, and you're out.
Yes.
Okay, so you're both is it your dad? Oh, it's your grandfather that was pretty big in the military.
Yes. At least I'm not too sure about on my mom's side how big he was, but I know on my dad's side he was very well known. So that would come into play on about my dad's side of the story, how he came here. But for my mom, they left Laos, went to Thailand. They stayed there for a few years, and then they came to America. You need, I forgot what the word is, but someone has to, I guess, sponsor you.
Yeah.
Yes, to come to America. So they were waiting on that. That's why they would stay at the refugee camps. And then for my dad's side of the stories, I feel like it's a little bit more intense, at least from what my dad told me. So he was younger than my mom. I'd say he was in Laos and he had to escape it. So he left in the middle of the night. He has 11 siblings, other siblings, but he left by himself this one night. I think some of them were already in Thailand waiting for him.
How old was he, do you think?
I know he came to America around, he was 11 or 10, so he was very young, probably 8, I believe. And so his dad, my grandfather's already in Thailand waiting for him. And so he had to escape on these boats. And how he tells me, it's there are 2 boats. You get on one of them. And because he was a kid, this young couple took care of him while they were on the boat. And so the boats went separate ways. And then the one boat, he remembered he heard gunshots. And so he was I don't know if those people ever made it to Thailand. But his boat made it eventually to Thailand with him, the young couple, and other people. And they had to wait until someone came to rescue them. So it was late at night. They dug holes in the sand and slept there. And then I think the cops from Thailand came and got them, brought them to their jail cell. And was you can't leave until someone comes picks you up, someone that they know. And so because my grandfather was so big in the military, he came by, picked up my dad. And then my dad was till this day, he wished he knew where that young couple, where they're at now today, because they took care of him and he's so grateful for that. So yeah, that was my dad's whole story. If you tried to escape, you get caught, you get executed. So I don't know how long he was in Thailand, but eventually he came to America at the age of 10 or 11. And then, both my parents, they started school here. So I guess continuing the story after escaping Laos, they started school here. None of them knew English. And then I guess going back to my mom's side, this is another thing. She started school not knowing English at all, and so she had to learn. And my parents, they speak English quite well today, so it was just a struggle. They had no money as well. My mom would tell me how they would have to go to church and get clothes from there, and then when they went to school, people would make fun of them because they didn't have nice clothes, they couldn't speak English, and so that was like their upbringing. That's what they grew up going through. And then eventually, you know, my parents met in Rhode Island. My dad like saw my mom at a laundromat, and it was like, she's the one. And he was chasing after her for some time until they eventually, you know, mom was like, okay,
yeah,
let's date.
Finally,
yeah. And then they had my sister and then me. They were like in their early 20s, and so I guess continue the story too. Where we lived in Providence, Rhode Island, so very, you know, it's the smallest state in the United States, and it wasn't a good area at all. Like around the corner from where our house was, you would get shot. So it's very dangerous. The school system was terrible, and my mom said, I don't want our kids to grow up in this environment. So we had family down here in Mooresville, North Carolina, South Carolina, all that, and we came to visit. My parents loved the weather. It's not snowing all the time. And then it was just a better environment. So my mom told my dad one day, it's like, you know what, I'm gonna pack the kids, pack everything, even though, you know, we don't have much, we're going to move down here so the kids can have a better environment to grow up in. And my dad wanted to stay, but then my mom's like, well, I'm going to go, you know.
Right.
And so, you know, we all came down, and we only had, my mom told me, only like a couple $1,000s. Like, we didn't have much. We ended up living at my aunt's house for a bit, and all four of us stayed in one small room. It was a laundry room, I believe. That's where we slept for a few months until we got our own place. But we didn't have much. And so years later, and the recession hit. You know, my dad, he ended up losing his job because he was newer he's a mechanic. He worked for Honda for many years, which is another part of his backstory. And he ended up switching from one Honda to another. And because I think there's a recession, and the person that owned that Honda store, or the shop, he got caught in like fraud or something like that, and so he knew he was gonna get fired because he was one of the first like newer people, and so he just quit, and he was like jobless for a while. I remember we didn't have much money. My sister was starting college around that time, and so my dad was like, you know what, I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I want to open my own business, like open my own mechanic shop. He didn't agree with like, you know, he worked for Honda for so long. He's met people, been in other places beside Honda, and he's like, yeah, most of these people, some of them don't have good ethics. Like, their ethical behavior, they'll do things, they'll try to sell you things that you don't need. And he's like, I don't want to do that. So he's like, I'm going to do this, like, on my own. And so he started the business. I was middle school, 12, 13. And so it was very slow at first, because, you know, it's a recession, and there were days when no one would come in. I helped my dad out. I worked there from the beginning all the way until I graduated high school. So, but then, you know, it's been 5-6 years, more than 6 years possibly. The business has grown. We have, you know, customers that come back all the time, and it's in the small town of downtown Mooresville, so like a lot of people go there and they know my family, and now my mom works there, so it's just, you know, the family business. Yeah.
So that, I mean, it's obviously like one of the crazier stories because, like, you know, I mean, I grew up like my dad's a contractor, but like it was all good. What's it like? Because with most people that start their own business, or like most contractors, like they come from it's a tougher background, right? They didn't grow up with a silver spoon. They grew up where money is scarce, and when you run a business, it's very, very different. Your mindset towards this stuff when you grow up with nothing versus when you grow up where like the world's your oyster. So when it comes to running a business and opening this stuff, I mean, your dad came from he was sleeping in sand, and then now he's got his own business. What's it like for him to operate the business, or like from your side of things, when you see how he approaches money, or you see how he approaches the business as a whole? Is he very like open-minded of like, yeah, let's try all these new things and be very like, yeah, screw it, we'll try it? Or is it very like, well, I don't want to lose any money, so let me go ahead and just like do everything I can to limit my losses?
I mean, my dad, like technology-wise, things are changing all the time. It's kind of the same with cars. Back then it was just a key put in the ignition, but now there's like push to start.
Right.
And he's willing to try new things, and he knows like he has to take a test every year or something like that to learn new things. And so he's okay with that. But with my parents, they've done finance in the past too, and their thing was they always said to my sister and I was like, don't spend more than like what you need. Like don't live beyond your means. I think that's the saying.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think they're pretty good with money. Yeah.
So what was it like on those days when there's nobody coming into the shop?
I remember those days. It was at the very beginning, maybe the first year or two. My dad he would just sit there in the office area with me. I was the receptionist, and so we just sit there. And I felt, it was kind of heartbreaking for me to see my dad because, obviously he did this also for the family. He wanted to like get us money and like build us. And my parents' goal was like for my sister and I to have a better future than what they had. And so it was just kind of heartbreaking. And we would just sit there. Sometimes we'd close early. There were literally days when no one would come in. So it was just sit there, have lunch, and then it's like, okay, we're closing early. We're going to go home. And that was it.
Because when you have a shop, I mean, there's also overhead. Like, you can't just like, oh yeah, when somebody comes in, it costs me money to like, change the oil or like whatever it is. You're still having fixed overhead that whether you get 100 people in that day or 0 people, you still got to pay for the shop. So it's like you're sitting there and the money is just slowly draining out no matter how many people you get in the day.
Yeah, it was a rough few years, but I mean, that's what they also say about startup companies. It might take like a couple years to start making profits, but I think it was more of because we were new, it was in the recession, and people didn't really know us. But then people, when they would come in, they realized, oh, this is a family business, I love that, and they want to support us. And my dad, like I said, he wanted to do everything right. He didn't want to tell people, hey, you need this even though you don't need it, or I don't know. But people really enjoyed that and liked that about him, so they would come back. So the business did grow from then.
So your mom during this time, there's really what I find is there's 2 scenarios with contractors when they start their own business. There's 2 scenarios that the spouses go through. One is they're very supportive. 2 is they're supportive, but they're not giving the contractors the time or the support that they need to get this thing going. Meaning they go, yep, I support you. I want this thing to work, but this thing better work in the next 2 months or else you're going to get a job. So it's almost like a pseudo support. So your mom during this time, how is she handling all this? Because she's got 2 kids to feed.
Yeah.
Your dad's sitting there. There's nobody coming in. And what's her mindset during this?
I mean, she was very supportive of my dad, because when he became a mechanic, she was there from the beginning. It was like, I support you. My mom told me this story. They actually sat down together. It was like, okay, if you are actually going to become a mechanic, you need to specialize in one of these cars. And you want to pick a car that a lot of people drive. And so, like, they drive it, they'll come to you to get it fixed. So she was very supportive from the beginning. Because he ended up opening his own shop, and it was very slow at the beginning. My mom was like, well, she's a beautician, she did hair, so she kept doing her job as well. So this is what happened during the day. I was 12, 13. During the day I was in school. My mom would be at the shop with my dad as like keeping things clean, picking up the phone, taking people in, and then by the time school was out, she'll come pick me up, I'll come and replace her, and she'd go to work. So she'd work all day with my dad and then go into her hair cutting job until like 9 p.m. She wouldn't get home until like 9:30, 10 p.m. And then we'd have dinner, and that was the day. And that was like that for many years. So she was very supportive of him.
So